Hi, everybody. Welcome to HEC Snowman Gaming. Today, we've got something brand new, some gaming news on the Switch 2. Rogue, can you fill us in on what's been going on?
Yes. Okay. So I have been keeping up to date with all of the rumors, and I'd like to fill you in on what we have gotten up until this point. So at the very beginning, it started out with somebody leaking these renders from what looks like inside some sort of 3D modeling software. I'm assuming CAD or maybe SolidWorks. Doesn't look like the UI of SolidWorks. I would know. I took it for like 2 semesters. Um, and when this first came out, a lot of people were theorizing that it was fake because they were like, there's no way somebody got files of the 3D model of the Switch 2 in their personal possession. Like, this has to be some hobbyer that's just trolling the community.
It does seem a little unbelievable.
Yeah, well, because that's not something that normally happens with Switch or Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo's usually very good at quashing leaks.
Yes, very good. I mean, that's the whole joke about the Nintendo ninjas. They keep everything on the down low. So a lot of people were saying like, "Oh, this is fake. An amateur did this." When I saw it, I was like, I don't know. This is a pretty good dupe. I mean, some of these bevels in here, I mean, they're pretty advanced. It's not like something some 17-year-old kid made in his basement. Like, this must have been a somewhat professional that made this to dupe the community. And there's more renders in here, like this one of the Joy-Con, which you can see there's an extra button underneath the home button.
Yeah, I saw that in the one pic that you sent a couple days ago. What is that? Is that a back button? Kind of looks like.
Now people have been able to make out that it's actually a C on there. And given the
Oh,
fact that it's a similar shape to the button we have on the left minus Joy-Con, people are theorizing that it's a capture button.
okay. Well, didn't we already have that previously with the camera button?
We do, but it's only on the left Joy-Con. So it's possible that this one is if you're splitting Joy-Cons, you're playing a two-player game, and the person with the plus Joy-Con wants to record something in the last 30 seconds, for example. Well, now they have their own capture button.
Oh, okay.
And there's
Interesting.
another theory as to the use of this button, which I'll get into later when we reveal more about the console.
Okay.
Um, right here, you can see this is what has been rumored to be the magnetic, electromagnetic connection of the Joy-Con, because
Right.
it isn't going to slide anymore. It's just going to
Yeah.
suction in.
Yeah, you mentioned that a little while back that there were rumors that it's not going to be a slide anymore, that it's just going to connect with magnets, which, I mean, in your opinion, is that better? Because that just on first blush feels less secure to me.
Um, I personally think that it's going to be a lot better because when you're holding it, you have to pull the Joy-Cons apart rather than it just kind of slipping downward out of your hands. Like, you know, when you hold the Switch sometimes, because the Joy-Cons slip out through the top, if you're not supporting the bottom of the tablet, it can sometimes feel a little loose.
And sometimes it
And
even slips if my hand pushes on the release thing a little bit.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
hopefully this will solve that. And I've heard that electromagnets are considerably strong, so it should actually provide a good suction.
Okay.
And then we got this render here, which is actually comparing the size of the Switch 2 on the top to the Switch 1 right here, which I
Oh,
assume is OLED, perhaps? Actually,
it
no, I think this is
looks.
Switch 1 because the speakers are on the front.
Okay, right. No, that looks considerably bigger, actually.
It is. It's like it's a little thick. Actually, I don't think it's much thicker. I think they said it was like zero point 0.1 centimeter thicker than the original, but it is definitely longer and taller.
No, for sure. Yeah, based off of the one render you sent me a couple days ago, it didn't look like it was that much thicker, but it definitely seems like we got a bigger screen to work with, which on handheld is always a boon.
Yes, it's definitely going to make the divide between playing on TV and playing in handheld a lot smaller. And then, let me just double check here. Yes, okay, we got one more. This showed the top and bottom. And what's really interesting here is you can see this is the charging port on the bottom of the
Mm-hmm.
Switch 2. And this is another USB-C port on the
Right.
top of the Switch too.
Yeah, no, I saw that in the render you sent, and I was like, is that what I think it is? Because if so, that will be so much more convenient that we can charge from both the bottom and the top. Because depending on how you're positioned or where you're laying down when you're playing on handheld while charging, it can be very inconvenient to have only one option.
Exactly. And another thing people were saying is that it's possible that this port can also be used for peripherals. So like
Peripherals.
a camera attachment. And maybe the C button on the Joy-Con, the right plus Joy-Con, is actually a camera button or a connect button. So it can connect to the peripheral that you have in this top USB-C port. These are all just theories, but I think they're interesting.
There are interesting theories. If we're going back to the age of peripherals, we're going back to the Game Boy Advance era. Does anybody remember the solar powered cartridge?
What?
Mini Snowman will fill us in. Go on.
Okay. Before my time. Okay, so those were those CAD renders, and people were still like, could have been an amateur, could have faked it, until this came out. It's a real picture of what looks to be injection molded parts with a motherboard inside and metal components.
And how is this different from the original Switch?
Well, this is different because obviously you can see these same magnetic rail slots on the right over here. And it looks like maybe a bigger battery, which is very nice. And as you can see, the difference in the Joy-Cons, it's very slight, but the edges look a little bit more soft.
They do.
Which could be good, especially if the Joy-Cons are going to be a little bit bigger, because you're going to have to fit your hands around them a little bit more, and it's going to be nice to have a more soft, almost Boolean curve on your hand, rather than like a perfectly right angle beveled curve. And
Right,
also you can see the slot for the Joy-Con sticks looks like it's a little bit bigger. At the point when the CAD renders were leaked, people were still skeptical. They still believed that it was possible that an amateur had just created this in their free time. But when this photo came out, it was like, okay, this might be legit because these are injection molded parts. I mean, you would have to pay a lot of money to get a company to do that for you. And it has specific circuitry of a motherboard custom to this case in the photo. And these metal components. So, like, if somebody's still duping this, it is a very, very high-effort dupe.
Right, very elaborate for a prank.
Yes. And at this point, it was basically confirmed for a lot of people that this was getting close to, like, okay, this might be real. This might be legit.
No,
maybe
makes
this
sense.
isn't, like, the final version that we'll see on, commercial shelves, but this is definitely, like, maybe, at the very least, an early development version of it that was given to, like, game developers to work with.
Right, like a dev kit?
Yes.
Awesome.
And I have another photo, I think it's back here. Yes, another closer look at the Joy-Cons. So you can see there's the S and R buttons over here.
They're so much bigger.
Yes. And this looks like the way it'll be charging. So it's not going to be on the bottom of the rail anymore. It's going to be like it appears just in the middle.
Okay.
And you can also see these holes for giant, buttons, which people are theorizing is the release button.
Okay. It's quite a bit bigger than the old release buttons.
Yes. And then,
I just assumed that was where the trigger went.
Yeah, a lot of people did think that it was going to be another button, but they were looking at it more and they're like, that's a really awkward placement for a button. You can even see it a little bit, I believe, right here, right there.
Yeah.
You can see those two things. Like, nobody's reaching back there to touch a third trigger button. So that's when people started thinking, like, oh, maybe that's a bigger release button for the Joy-Cons.
I mean, maybe, but, like, do you want a release button to be bigger? Because I thought the idea behind having such a small one on the Switch 1 was that you didn't want to accidentally press it when you didn't want to. I mean, unless it's being depressed or triggered in a very unintuitive way, in which case I can kind of see it like operated in the way that you're describing.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why it's bigger is to provide more leverage because I think that these magnetic Joy-Cons are going to be a lot stronger. So you're going to need somewhere to put your fingers to pull the Joy-Cons off of the console. And by
Just
having bigger buttons, it provides a larger surface area for you to do that.
okay, so just better purchase for releasing the Joy-Cons.
Yes.
Okay.
And finally, I believe it was like a couple days ago, a third-party accessory manufacturer released a video, I believe it was, with these renders in it, which is a case for the Switch 2. They straight up said it in the video. It's a case for the Switch 2.
Uh-oh. Somebody's
Yes.
getting sued into the ground.
And I have a second photo over here, which gives you a little bit more clarity on that.
I
You
see.
can see it has a U-shaped kickstand, which is probably going, that's just a feature of the case, but I assume that also pops out for the actual Switch 2's U-shaped kickstand, which was something that was leaked by a person who had felt the Switch. Nintendo brought in a couple developers to feel the Switch without looking at it, and one of the features that he described was bigger third trigger button on the Joy-Cons, which we now know is the release buttons. And the other feature that he said was a U-shaped kickstand.
Okay, two things. One, yes, from this angle, they definitely look a lot more like release paddles than actual like gameplay buttons.
Yes.
Which saddens me a little bit because we haven't really had a change from the basic Xbox 360 template in a long time. But secondly, I'm sorry, were they blindfolded or they brought into a dark room and just allowed to feel the Switch?
I think what they said was basically they were given like a box with the Switch inside, and I think they stuck their hands into the box, but they couldn't look inside the box, and they just kind of felt the Switch too.
Schrodinger's Switch too.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
But
pretty elaborate, Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Nintendo to try something like that.
No, not at all. Go on.
So basically what this confirmed, the U-shaped kickstand, was that the Switch in this photo is the same one that people have been leaking with CAD files and the injection molded parts.
Right.
So the final, nail in the coffin was, okay, well, maybe this accessory company just released a render of this case modeled around the leaks of the Switch 2 to get ahead of the curve. But their CEO confirmed in an interview that this case was not designed based off of guesswork. It was based off of a 3D scan of the console that they were given access to.
Wow, he just straight up admitted that.
Yes.
Wow, Nintendo snipers are already on his roof.
And the final nail in the coffin was these renders from another third-party accessory manufacturer, and their accessory is this blue case for all the parts, but this just really gives you a clear look at all of these features of the Switch 2.
Oh,
so you see the release trigger right here.
Yeah.
You've got the C button right here underneath.
Okay.
The U-shaped kickstand right here.
Oh, I see it now. Yeah.
The release triggers right there again. Let's see.
Yeah, these are the renders that you sent to me a couple days ago. So this is the only one I've seen so far before you show me the new ones.
Because these were okay, final nail in the coffin. This is the Switch 2, undoubtedly.
Yeah. The first thing I noticed was, obviously we mentioned it before, the USB-C ports on both the bottom and the top. But also I noticed the speaker placement looks interesting. Is that different from the way it was before?
Let me see. It is actually most similar to the OLED, actually.
Okay.
Because with the Switch 1, the speakers were on the front as like a hole in the screen the
Right.
screen
Yeah.
protector, and there was a lot of dust that could get in there, and it was just kind of ugly. But when the
Hmm.
OLED screen got bigger, they pushed the speakers to the bottom of the console.
Okay. Yeah. No, I have a regular Switch. I don't have an OLED, so to me that looks very new.
Yes. Well, it's all very exciting, but I think what is a little concerning to me
Hmm?
is that this console, to the untrained eye, looks almost identical to the Switch One.
Oh no. Are you saying that you fear another Wii U situation?
Yes, a lot of people, there's a lot of discourse going around that this could be another Wii U situation where consumers just can't tell the difference between a Switch 1 and a Switch 2. And I can't blame them. I mean, when you look at this console, are people really going to notice the C button difference, or the different release buttons, or the change in the kickstand shape? All of these features are things that we would notice because we're gamers, but to the consumer, the family that's going out to buy this console, the people that Nintendo is most heavily targeting, are they going to notice those differences? And you might make the
Now,
argument like, oh, well, it's bigger. You can obviously tell that. How do you communicate size in a marketing trailer? You can't really do that.
yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, and maybe you're already going this direction, but I can see three counterpoints just off the bat. One, unlike the Wii U, presumably it's going to be called the Switch 2. If it's
Yes.
not, and it's called something like the Switch U or something stupid like that, which I could totally see Nintendo doing that. Heck, Xbox also is terrible at naming their consoles. Yeah, I'll admit it. Um, then yes, I can 100% see that being a problem. I think they almost have to call it the Switch 2. If they call it anything that even throws any amount of doubt that it's not an iteration and instead of just uh, an add-on, then they're that then you got the Wii U all over again. And I'm hoping they've learned their lesson from the Wii U and will give it a name, either the Switch Next or the Switch 2 or something that is definitively communicates to the average consumer this is a brand new product. Second thing is I think it needs a killer app, something that can only be played on the Switch 2.
Yes.
I think the novelty of the original Switch was enough that even though their killer app, which was Breath of the Wild, could technically be played on a Wii U or a Switch, a lot of people were like, "Well, I'm totally buying this on this brand new console that I can take around and you can play on the TV and in handheld." Because the Switch 2 will not have that novelty, I think the killer app for year one of the Switch 2 has to be exclusive to the Switch 2. I would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last thing is kind of what you already touched on, marketing. I think this needs a killer marketing scheme where they need to make it very clear to everyone from the get-go, this is more powerful, has a longer battery life, this thing is playing games that we could never be played on the Switch. There needs to be a marketing blitz that puts first and foremost the idea of all the things that make the Switch 2 powerful and special that you can't see from the outside. And I think if
Yes,
they do those three things correctly, they can avoid a Wii U situation.
exactly. And more on your last point there, I was watching a Kit and Krista video,
Oh, yeah.
which were, two former marketing workers for Nintendo of America before the LA studio shut down. And they were talking about the process of marketing the Switch 1, which was extremely insightful because they were talking about how there was a fight inside their branch of whether or not they should do a more traditional, like CGI animated floating console in white room show off of like, oh,
Hmm.
look at this is the specs, this is how big the screen is, this is the games being shown, or if they should go with the approach that they ultimately went with, which was showing people in everyday situations using the console,
Hmm.
detaching the Joy-Cons, putting it in tabletop mode with the kickstand. And ultimately, that was the best decision because the games weren't really the thing that you were buying the Switch for when the Switch came out. It had
Hmm.
Breath of the Wild, but a 3D Mario, Super Mario Odyssey, didn't release until later in the year of the Switch's life cycle.
True.
And it was extremely underpowered. It wasn't giving you anything like what Xbox or Sony could offer you with third-party support from basically every large franchise. You were losing a lot when you were choosing to buy a Switch. So they needed to show off more of the physical aspects of the Switch, like how you could use it in different environments. And I think if they're going to have success with the Switch 2, they need to focus on the games, because the Switch 2 itself looks so similar to the Switch 1. People already know how the Switch 1 works. What they need to focus on is, hey, look at this Mario game. Look at how big it is. Look at how good it looks. This is something that could only be done on a more powerful console like the Switch 2. And I think that's why Nintendo, there was a rumor a while back that Nintendo pushed back the release date of the Switch 2 in order to let more software be developed for the console so it could have a stronger year one. And I think that is the best decision that they made, because the games are going to be what's selling this console, nothing else.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And I think that that's the smartest thing that they could do. I think you're right that they could get away with that with the first Switch, only really having one killer app on day one at launch, and not even technically an exclusive with Breath of the Wild, because the concept was so cool. Even from day one, when I saw that original trailer, I was hooked from the beginning based off of the concept. I wasn't a Zelda fan back then. I didn't play a lot of Mario back then, but the concept completely sold me and was like, at some point, I got to get my hands on this console. And I had never bought a Nintendo console outside of the Game Boy Advance prior to that trailer convincing me that I should. The other aspect is kind of what you mentioned about the games. Nintendo's kind of in a unique spot because they don't have to compete with Xbox or PlayStation. They're really just competing with people who just want to keep owning their Switch 1. They're they just have to be better than they were, which is a really great position to be in if they can capitalize on that. And I think that that's what they have to do, is convince people who love their Switch, people like our dad who just play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe every day after work, and that's all they do. You need to convince that person, hey, it is worth it to upgrade to this new console so that you can play even better games like Mario Kart 9, the next 3D open world Mario, the next, I don't think the next Zelda is going to be ready next year, Metroid Prime 4, you name it. Like, yeah, if they can have a killer lineup, not just year one, but day one on launch for the Switch 2, combined with a killer marketing scheme, a sensible name,
yes,
then I think that they could absolutely kill it.